And I am really happy to be moderating the session because we have a very enlightened group of speakers who are going to share their thoughts about how they're addressing digital inequality in their various countries and some of the great initiatives that they are undertaking. So I'm going to start with a country that has produced some of the best athletes in the world and also gave us reggae. I'm going to Jamaica, and I have His Excellency Dr. Daryl Vaz. He's the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology of Jamaica. Can we have His Excellency Dr. Vaz up, if you can see him? And I just wanted to pose a question to His Excellency. His Excellency Dr. Vaz. The issue of internet connectivity is a big problem, and I know that Jamaica has also been looking at issues of digital divide. So what is Jamaica doing to address the issue of digital divide in its country?
Thank you very much for the question. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying the government of Jamaica is pleased to join the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, and our global partners for another World Summit on the Information Society High-Level Policy Session. As it pertains to your question regarding broadband access, we know that technology and broadband can, when available, improve and enhance the way we work and live. With the introduction and accelerated advancement of technologies, having access to affordable and abundant broadband is quickly becoming the most critical infrastructure of our time. In light of this, the issue of internet access and connectivity is seen as perhaps one of the most fundamental concerns of nations within the region and globally. Jamaica, with a population of just about 2.73 million, boasts some 1.97 million mobile and fixed internet users as of September 2020. With the advent of COVID-19, the demand for broadband access is on the rise. While our mobile penetration rate continues to be quite strong, with 2.78 million mobile connections as of September 2020, a penetration rate of over 100%, the internet penetration rate in Jamaica is just about 72.3%, a number which we are not satisfied. Notwithstanding the progress that we have made this far, there are still communities in Jamaica that are lacking adequate internet service or do not have access at all, creating this digital divide between those with access and those without. Rural areas in particular are more costly and more difficult for the provisioning advanced broadband networks. Given that what has happened with COVID-19, the education system in particular is now experiencing greater reliability on digital learning, and as such, it is critical to address the ICT infrastructure paucity across the country. Given this, the government of Jamaica is rolling out a national broadband initiative. The aim of this initiative is to provide internet connection to every household by year 2025, with key considerations being affordability and access, especially for the unserved and the underserved. The government's ultimate intention is to make internet access a public good. The objective of the broadband initiative are to achieve universal access, boost adoption and usage, improve quality and coverage of key services such as health and education, and more broadly, public services, and guarantee affordability. The broadband initiative will seek to accomplish these objectives by first developing a national broadband strategy and then implementing a national broadband network such that no citizen is left behind. Robust bandwidth, we know, is a foundation for innovation as well as key infrastructure needed to succeed and capitalize on the internet's application and benefits. Research demonstrates a direct correlation between the use of internet applications and the revenue growth and productivity for a country. With today's economy more dependent on innovation and connectivity to survive and thrive, providing high-speed internet is critical in moving Jamaica forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Vaz. It's very exciting to hear about the National Broadband Initiative that Jamaica has, and to see that you're very keen to ensure that there's universal access by 2025. So we're going to be looking out for the National Broadband Policy and the strategy, and how we can also learn from Jamaica on how to connect citizens, giving them universal access. So moving on to the Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Her Excellency Miss Allyson West. And it's very interesting to hear about what Jamaica is doing, but I also want to see what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago, how digital transformation has been a key issue for Trinidad and Tobago, and what you are doing specifically to address the issue of the digital divide in Trinidad and Tobago. So Your Excellency, Miss Allyson West, really good to see you, and I'll be glad to hear from you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists, and good morning to the participants. The government's comprehensive view of digital transformation is founded on leveraging technology to improve the quality of life and standards of living for all our citizens. This government's actions and responsibilities are focused on the creation of policies, legal and regulatory systems, processes, and the provision of enabling services to create an environment that allows citizens of the country to flourish. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has a clear vision for digital transformation, and part of that is to ensure digital equity. In our Vision 2030 Sustainable Development Plan, we have stated that Trinidad and Tobago will be an interconnected, technologically advanced society with modern information and communication systems, driving innovation, growth, and social progress. Our view of social progress with regard to ICT is articulated in our ICT blueprint, which lays out the goal: empowered people, where citizens have pervasive access to ICT, are connected to broadband infrastructure, which provides a variety of services that are affordable, of high quality, safe, and secure, and are deriving high value from the use of ICT, benefiting themselves and society. Our government is fully committed to this journey. We have recognized that there are two main manifestations of the digital divide in the country that often reinforce each other. One is social and the other is geographic. The impacts are seen in access and capacity. To address access, through our Telecommunications Authority, we are partnering with internet service providers to bring increased bandwidth to underserved locations in the country. We are also building out internet access centers in locations where affordability of access is a challenge. We have also partnered with the ISPs to have some sites zero-rated. That is, access to sites which are critical for citizens, and in particular the vulnerable in society, such as the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Health, and the Police Service Call Center are not charged against data usage. To address capacity, we are entering into a partnership with Microsoft to bring the capacity of 50,000 citizens initially, to enable them to increase their uptake and the realization of maximum benefit. To effect this training, we will engage 250 monitors. These monitors will be assigned to our access centers to provide mentoring to citizens who require assistance to enable them to access the services of e-government. One of the big concerns we have had is the disruption of student life for primary and secondary school students as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are aware that some students did not have access to the internet, and some did not have access to adequate devices for remote teaching. The government therefore embarked on a program with the assistance of corporate and other citizens to provide computer and portable Wi-Fi devices to students who do not have their own or do not have reliable internet access to facilitate distance learning. The government has a program of subsidizing smartphones for persons with disabilities and training such persons to maximize their use of those devices to allow improved access and connectivity. In the delivery of e-services, the government has prioritized services that meet the needs of social protection of our most vulnerable. The onset of COVID-19 highlighted the need to ensure that protections are readily accessible. Government has prioritized the delivery of social services, health services, and education. We have embarked on increased availability of government services online. The number of services that we have been developing include student learning management systems for students, access to civil registry, and almost full suite of e-services in the judiciary to facilitate the more efficient administration of justice, improvements in the planning process, which would lead to the facilitation of responsible construction. It will be observed that we are addressing two priorities simultaneously. Even as we introduce new e-government services, we are ensuring that this venture can be accomplished sustainably as we contend with our limited resources. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Allyson West. It was very great to hear about Trinidad and Tobago's Digital Transformation 2030 plan, and also to hear about your ICT blueprints and what you're doing. I was very, excited to hear about the partnerships that you are seeking with ISPs and with companies. And that is something that's so instrumental. In order to close the digital divide, we need to look at partnerships. So very happy to hear about all these initiatives that you're doing in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm looking forward to visiting the island one day to see all these initiatives. Right, so we go on to Chile now, to Her Excellency, Miss Pamela Gidi, who would be giving us some of the things that Chile is doing. So Miss Pamela Gidi, what initiatives is your government taking to address the digital inequalities that we have in Chile? And how has the pandemic shaped how Chile has responded to all these digital inequalities?
One of our main objectives is to double the kilometers of fiber optic in Chile in these 4 years. And for that, we have two projects. One, the national optic fiber will benefit more than 2 million people in 186 boroughs, while the Austral fiber optic project will benefit 500,000 people in the southern 3 regions of Chile. Those are 16 boroughs. We have been developing different initiatives from Subtel that connect more citizens digitally. This is reflected already in the numbers that we present in our quarterly statistics. Since as March of 2020, we had 55% Chilean households with fixed internet connection, while now we saw 1 year after, we saw that number increased to 60% of households connected. And on the mobile side, we also had 16 million access of 4G, and 1 year after, 18 million access of 4G. And in addition, we presented the law of national automatic roaming, which will significantly expand the coverage of mobile telephony and mobile internet services in more than 3,300 locations. There we are forcing companies to share the infrastructure for those areas that there's only one operator in rural areas. Additionally, the tender for 5G network contemplated territorial equity through social considerations, like providing connectivity in 366 locations that have mobile internet today, and also connecting all public hospitals in Chile. Those are 200 hospitals, and also requiring connect on not only big urban locations, but all capital, regional capitals and provinces capitals. Those we feel comfortable will be a very even deployment for 5G, covering 90% of the population in the maximum time of 2 years around the country. The existence of more and better connectivity for the inhabitants of the country, especially in times like now, implies that they will be able to access better jobs, have a better education, better tools, and be closer and closer to their family when they cannot move from their houses, because we are still 1/3 of our country now is in quarantine. Of course, the pandemic has forced people to bring their daily lives and daily activities to their home, and in their context, connectivity became essential, and those who had connectivity could continue their lives, and the ones who didn't, they couldn't. They even could not telework, therefore they can have even to quit their jobs. Therefore, is reducing the digital gap is even more than ever our main objective. Connectivity is essential, and that has become even more evident now as a result of the pandemic, which has forced both people and companies to carry out various activities digitally to prevent infections or go bankrupt, respectively. Pandemic has put industry to the test, and telecommunications industry was not an exception. We have seen exponential growth in mobile and fixed data traffic of more than 50%. Another issue that is very important is that the thousands of women experience a big damage in their income because they have to stay home because nurseries and schools were closed, and that had basically meant that forced participation of women in workforce fall 10 years behind. According to figures of Foundation of Women, in September 2020, 88% of the women who lost their jobs left their workforce, and all this because many women could not telecommute during quarantines, and some of them could not even telework because they didn't have connectivity at all. So we are working specifically to target that sector because has been the more damage with pandemic, and we'll continue like this while schools and nurseries continue being closed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pamela Gidi, Vice Minister and Secretary of Telecommunications Chile. It's very insightful to hear about Chile's work, the work you're doing on double fiber connectivity and the national roaming as well, which is very important in order to close the coverage gaps. We've seen national roaming in other countries, and it would be great to see the example from Chile and how that has helped with the coverage. It's also very touching to hear about the digital gender gap and how 88% of women have left the workforce because there was no connectivity, and how you're trying to target the women and in closing the digital gender gap. So very, very commendable initiatives there, and we look forward to hearing how Chile is doing and what we can learn from Chile's example. So moving on now to Nicaragua, a country I very much love to visit. I would like to speak to Ms. Nahima Díaz, who is the Director General. Ms. Díaz, how has Nicaragua reduced the digital gender gap? And are there some great examples you could share or initiatives we could learn from?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mr. Malcolm Johnson, Mr. Eleanor Sarpon, Ms. Bilal Jamouzi, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, please all receive a fraternal greeting from Nicaragua. We want to express our gratitude to the organizers of the World Summit on the Information Society Forum 2021 for the invitation to participate in this important event. In Nicaragua, since 2007, when our government took office, progress has been made in improving the country's connectivity, with a special emphasis on impoverished, vulnerable, and historically marginalized community and population. Our government directed working with the National Human Development Plan to benefit Nicaraguan families. This plan is to improve basic services such as drinking water, electric power, road infrastructure, and telecommunications too. Thanks to this Human Development Plan, 500 years of historic isolation from the Caribbean coast have been eradicated with the construction of roads. 2,794 new kilometers of highways have been built to connect the Caribbean coast region with the Pacific region, thus obtaining a growth of 137% of the country road network, placing Nicaragua since 2017 as the country with the best roads in Central America. In electrical energy, coverage has gone from 54% in 2006 to 97% in 2020, with subsidies of up to 40% of the bill for those who consume less than 150 kilowatts per month. In other words, the coverage went from a little more than a half of the households to cover almost the entire national territory in these 13 years of our government. The improvements in the road infrastructure and in the electrical energy network have been a bridge to improve and expand the telecommunications network. In internet connectivity, we have gone from 49,833 subscribers in 2008 to 3,647,657 subscribers in 2020. Regarding cell phones, thanks to good consumer protection practices through public policies that encourage growth and healthy competition between providers, we have gone from 1,617,319 users in 2006 to 5,976,479 cell phone users in 2020, with the coverage in almost the entire national territory. Through our broadband program, the construction of 2,580 kilometers of fiber optic for broadband was achieved in the Caribbean coast region of Nicaragua that historically was the most isolated in the country. This deployment guarantees coverage to 93 of the 153 municipalities in Nicaragua, reaching 60.78% of national coverage of broadband infrastructure. It has been achieved that 4.9 million people have the possibility of accessing fixed and mobile telecommunication services, equipping and connecting 149 healthcare centers with broadband services, and enabling 100 productive telecenters to train and take advantage of the application developed to increase the efficiency of producers. Also, we are working in connecting all the institutions of our government with this deployment. Regarding citizen security, police services have been modernized for the benefit of population, since technological kiosks has been installed in police units, Managua, and in departmental capitals too. In addition, the website of the National Police was enabled to carry out online procedures, and online complaint was implemented too. We also have the Center for Advanced Studies in Broadband for Development, CEABAD, which offers training adapted to the needs of broadband capacity building in the countries of Central America, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. We consider that the ICT are a double-edged sword in terms of inequality in societies, but their final impact depends on the policies of states based on our economic and social realities, promoting access to various telecommunication services in remote areas, the expansion of cellular telephony in corners of all of the country, and internet connectivity contributing to inclusion, redistribution, participation, protagonism, and empowerment. and in this way contributes to the reduction of poverty and inequality by reducing the information and communication gap. These are some of the lines of action that our government has taken to drive the country toward progress, reducing the digital bridge so that the Nicaraguan population has access for better conditions and can improve the quality of life. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Director General Díaz. It's very insightful to hear about the infrastructure and exponential growth in Nicaragua because of your investment in roads, electricity, and connectivity, and to hear about some of the important things that you've done for your population. So thank you very much for sharing those initiatives, and I'm sure that there's a lot we can learn from Nicaragua as well. So moving on to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we'll be speaking to Director of National Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, Mr. Apollo Knights. Mr. Knights, I just wanted to find out what are some of the innovative approaches that you've taken to address the digital divide in your country, and so that the issues of affordability can be captured? And then also, what other disparities have you seen that you think contributes to the digital divide in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Mr. Knights.
Excellencies, colleagues and participants, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to be part of this panel of stakeholders addressing some of the critical issues facing our countries related to the digital divide, such as my own St. Vincent and Grenadines located in Eastern Caribbean. Two main digital divide dimensions are connectivity and access devices. While smartphones provide a great level of accessibility to citizens, it can be safe to say that for real productivity and human resource development, access to computers is key. While St. Vincent and Grenadines has had a government policy of zero tariffs on the importation of computers for many decades, our penetration level of computers at the household level is still just 51%. Compared to excess of 80% for major household appliances such as televisions, fridges, etc. The computer can be considered in the category of a major appliance in our country as the price points are similar. One may then ask why the penetration rate is so different between other major appliances when compared to computers. This has to do with affordability. Our society is still highly cash-based with a very low percentage of the population having credit cards. As such, the purchase of major appliances is normally done via in-store credit facilities referred to as hire purchase, which came around in the 1980s. Interest rates for these purchases are normally around 20% annually, similar to a credit card a month. However, such an option for computers did not arrive until around 7 years ago, but is only done by one major retailer, with annual interest rates ranging from 29% to 49%, depending on the repayment period chosen. For example, a 1-year repayment plan carries an interest rate of 49%. One may consider such interest rates, if implemented by our banks, to be loan sharking. To address this digital divide situation, our regulator, the NTRC, has been mandated by our government to proceed with the pilot project this year, 2021, to do a public-private partnership with one or more of our computer retailers to facilitate a more affordable credit option to our citizens. We are starting a pilot with a $250,000 EC fund, which is about $100,000 US, to test the concept. If it works, we can scale it up. The concept is also designed to be self-sustaining over time. So let me summarize our innovative approach on this concept. We have asked computer retailers to submit proposals based on our concept and guidelines, and we will then choose one or more to partner with. The NTRS will finance the upfront costs of purchasing the computers. We have set a cap on the markup our retail partner can charge the customers for cash purchases, which is 25% markup level. We have also set a cap on annual interest rates of 12% annually for credit purchases, which is similar to the interest rates that our banks and credit unions will normally charge for consumer loans to purchase such items. The retailers will share the profits both from cash sales and credit interest with the NTRC on an agreed ratio. The retailers will handle all aspects of advertising and selling the computers at their stores and dealing with credit approvals and payments, etc. The shared profits received by the NTRC as well as the cost price received back from payments will go back into the computer fund to purchase more computers going forward. It will not be a profit-making business case for the NTRC, but all in the public interest. So hopefully at Wsis 2022, I can report on how this pilot initiative has worked. We see this as just another form of subsidizing, as is done with our other universal service initiatives that we have done in the past, but which were mainly geared at broadband access and not devices. Our ultimate goal is to have household penetration of computers to be more than 90% in the next 5 years. And to your second question on disparities we see currency exchange rates. While computers in SVG are tariff-free, only attracts a 4% customs levy, a model that will cost $500 US in New York will cost someone in SVG around $1,700 EC dollars. So the retail price has changed due to a few factors: the currency exchange rates of the two countries, shipping costs, and small customs tariff fee, with the main one being the currency exchange rate. Now, if the wages in our country were higher than when compared to those in the USA at the same ratio as the exchange rates, then the real cost to each buyer will be very similar, as one can say there's purchase parity of citizens in both countries. However, it is not. The minimum wage in the US is around $8 US per hour, while in our country it's $1. There is the real issue of affordability in developing countries compared to the developed. It is all about the exchange currency rates. Yes, we can say some countries are wealthier than others, and there's a reason for the difference in exchange rates. That could have been a reason 5 decades ago, but not the full picture today.
Mr. Knight, if we could please wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
Okay, yes, thank you. It seems that the developing countries are still having their currency backed by some commodities, be it gold or another currency, while it seems that the developed countries have moved away from this requirement. The USA, for example, whose currency is a standard for global trade, had their currency backed by gold until this practice was stopped in the early 70s. However, our country currency is still back to the US dollar at 2.71. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's one of the big issues I think could be solved by using cryptocurrencies that can maybe solve this issue of instead of having a central authority of controlling the existing currency system. So thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Knight. You raised some very interesting points there, especially on the currency exchange rates. But fortunately, the FCC acting chair is here, Madam Jessica Rosenworcel. So I'm sure you could take it up with her when it comes to the discussions and the disparities between the US and St. Vincent and Grenadines. But it's also, I'm happy that you raised the issue about devices and the importance of ensuring that there's better affordability of devices and computers. So it's great to hear that you raised those points as well. So moving on to the USA now, I'm very excited to be inviting Madam Ms. Jessica Rosenworcel. She's the acting chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission. And Ms. Rosenworcel, you are very passionate advocate for the issue of digital, addressing the digital divide, particularly when it comes to the homework gap. And I've been following some of your tweets and some of your write-ups on this, and especially during the COVID-19. So what is the FCC done specifically to address the issue of the homework gap? And also, what are some of the issues that you think barriers that are to ensuring that there's broadband adoption? And then finally, what should be the role of regulators in ensuring that we're able to address the digital inequalities when it comes to the homework gap?
Thank you very much. It is such an honor to join so many high-level representatives from the Wsis stakeholder community. You know, as acting chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, I believe that the future belongs to the connected. No matter who you are or where you live in this world, you need access to modern communications to have a fair shot at 21st century success. And nothing has demonstrated the importance of connectivity like the ongoing pandemic. As a global community, we need connections, physical and digital, that strengthen our mutual bonds. We need communications that reach us all to help us work, learn, be informed, enlightened, and entertained. And we need connections that can break down barriers that for too long have held too many back. So I want to thank my distinguished peers today for sharing their experiences. We are learning that there are so many aspects to the digital divide, but I'm going to laser-like focus on one of them that you asked me about. It's what I call the homework gap. Now, when I was growing up, homework required nothing more than your siblings leaving you alone and a number 2 pencil. But those days are gone because now internet access is required. And the best evidence of this is the past school year. In the United States, so many schools shut down part-time or full-time and reverted to remote learning. What this means is students were told to head online to class, but students without internet access at home were locked out of the virtual classroom. And this is happening all over the world, so let's do some math. In the United States, our data shows that as many as 16.9 million children in the country fall into the homework gap. And according to a report commissioned by the United Nations Children's Fund and the ITU, 2.2 billion, or 67% of children around the world lack internet access at home. And of course, this problem hits low-income countries the hardest, affecting as much as 94% of children. Now, I believe this is the cruelest part of our worldwide digital divide. And we need to make it a priority to fix this homework gap and connect every student so they have a fair shot at continuing their education. So I'm going to share with you very quickly the things we are doing in the United States to help fix the homework gap. First, we've launched an emergency broadband benefit to help families that are struggling to pay for internet service during this pandemic. This program provides a discount of up to $50 a month towards broadband service and as much as $75 a month on our tribal lands. Families are also eligible to receive discounts to purchase computers or tablets to connect them to the internet. Second, we are expanding our federal programs to connect schools and libraries to broadband. And in the coming weeks, the FCC is going to adopt new rules that will help school libraries do things like loan out Wi-Fi hotspots and other connectivity devices to students who lack reliable internet access at home. And third, and finally, we're taking action to better understand the scope of our national broadband deployment challenges, because we're never going to manage the problems we don't measure. So one of my first actions as acting chair was to stand up a broadband data task force to help us build the most accurate, up-to-date maps of where broadband service is and is not all throughout the country. We need accurate maps, we need up-to-date data. And this will make sure our efforts to bridge the digital divide are focused in the right places and that our limited resources will make a difference. And I look forward to sharing more about what we learned from this effort soon. And of course, acting on all of this is not a moment too soon because this is about the future. This pandemic has taught us like nothing before that broadband is no longer nice to have. It's need to have for everyone, everywhere. That's especially true for students, and we have work to do on this front in the United States and worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jessica Rosenworcel. And it's very exciting to hear about the initiatives that you're taking, specifically the emergency broadband benefits. I mean, I'm very happy to see that you have a targeted approach towards those who live in tribal lands as well, because it's important to look at marginalized groups and groups that are least likely to get online. So I'm very happy to hear that. And also to see that you're mapping broadband gaps, because often we see that there's the data is not there or not readily available. So I'm hoping that this will be very open, that everybody else will be able to get access to. So, you know, I'm very excited to hear all these initiatives moving on. So moving on now to Uruguay, to Dr. Mercedes Aramendia. And Dr. Aramendia, I wanted to find out from you, what are the factors that affect or the reduction of the digital gap in your country? And what are the main regulatory challenges that you see facing this initiative to close the gap?
Thank you for your question. Good morning for some, good afternoon, and good night for others. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to participate in this panel with such outstanding speakers dealing with this critical issue for development and global sustainability. There is no simple factor that influences the reduction of digital gap. The digital divide is complex, multidimensional, and economic, social, political, and cultural aspects directly and indirectly have influence in the digital gap, which have an effect on people, businesses, governments. It is essential to identify those inequalities between regions, mainly between the urban and rural areas, and social groups of the population to look for equality. In Uruguay, the evolution of the telecommunication industry has been positive. For instance, as of 2019, we have a mobile penetration of more than 160%. Also by 2019, we had an internet connection of 28% of households and fixed broadband of 71%. Internet access is widespread, but differences in access are identified according to income level and whether we are in Montevideo, which is the Uruguay capital, or other regions such as rural areas. For example, among households in the highest income quantity, 95% of these households have an internet connection and 86% have fixed broadband. In families with the lowest income, 84% have an internet connection and 51% with fixed broadband. If we compare Montevideo with the other regions of the country, in other regions, internet connection is 83% and fixed broadband is 63%. And in Montevideo, internet connection is 94% and fixed broadband 79%. There is no doubt that the pandemic of COVID-19 has accelerated the digital transformation all over the world, which helped to introduce and develop digitalization, increasing access to information and connectivity, but it is essential to work on the gaps. In this line, as recognized by the World Summit of the Information Society before, among the main challenges on which we must work, I highlight the following. First, protect all human rights, ensuring that their rights are respected online and offline. Integrate equality perspectives, seeking to empower women, looking for their full participation, as well as equality in all spheres of society and decision-making processes. Reduce the digital divide, expand access to ICT, and connect everyone, for which is necessary to improve and facilitate the construction and implementation of telecommunication networks. Increase access to information, education, and knowledge for all. All people must have the basis knowledge and means to participate in the information society. Respect human diversity in all the forms, culture, languages, traditions, beliefs, and religions. Generate confidence in using ICTs is essential to increase security and privacy on the network. Raise awareness of the ethical dimension of the use of ICT and promote interdisciplinary dialogue. It is certainly that all what I just mentioned is not easy, it's not an easy process, but what is crucial is dialogue, the constant exchange between the entire ecosystem, because not only it is necessary to be clear about the goals that we have, but also we have to work to arise them in the way in which we work to arise them is essential too. Good regulation is key to developing services, contributing directly to drive innovation and research, while providing predictability, clarity, clear rules, all of which are essential for joint development. Challenges are several. Among them, I highlight find the balance. Regulation has to be necessary, proportional, and suitable. It is essential to find the means and also promote self-regulation, as it contributes to being more flexible, adapting faster, and in some instances, to respond accordingly. It's not a simple process. There are many stakeholders with diverse interests and needs. In general, everyone has their part of the reason, so it's necessary to be flexible, adaptable, and to listen and dialogue constantly. There is a lot of uncertainty about the future, but decisions have to be made, and we must work within the framework that we have or trying to improve it, seeking collaboration and contributing with the entire ecosystem to reach the best potential solutions. Everything is changing very fast, so we have to find a fair rhythm. If it is too slow, we may fall behind and do not respond as we should. And if we go too fast, we probably cannot listen or consider all aspects. Given the above, it is necessary to provide security, predictability, and transparent rules. In some cases, as the change is constant, regulation should be adapted, and it's crucial to understand the technical and business aspect, being flexible and adaptable, and look constantly for proportional solutions. We must tend to collaborate, to collaborative regulation, dialogue, and listen. So I think that we'll have to look for quality access for all, digital skills and education for all, innovation, transparency, security. We have to attend the objectives, needs, and possibility. Finally, I want to emphasize that to achieve sustainable development, minimize gaps, and leave no one behind, is needed to adopt transversal actions, collaborate, and coordinate with the whole ecosystem at the national, regional, and international levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mercedes Aramendia. And I'm very pleased that you mentioned the issues about collaboration, especially, ensuring that we are collaborating, we are listening to the people that you're working with in terms of regulations, making sure that it's very flexible to adapt to the changes that we see. And also just making sure that in terms of co-creation, all those who are going to be impacted by the decisions we make in regulations are part of that process. So collaboration, the very key word that you have raised there. So we thank you so much for those who are continuing to send us questions. Please make sure you drop them in the chat box, and we will pick them at the end of when all the panelists have spoken. We've just got 2 more panelists who have very insightful contributions to make. So we're moving on to Peru now, to Mr. Luis Pacheco, who is the manager of enforcement of the Enforcement Directorate at the Telecoms Regulatory Agency. So Mr. Luis Pacheco, are there any specific technologies that you think could help to address the digital divide? If there are some examples from Peru that you might want to raise, and how does 5G, there's all this discussion about 5G, do you think that 5G will be able to help us to achieve this goal of closing the inequalities that we have?
First, kind regards to all panelists and participants. Thank you very much to ITU for the kind invitation to this high-level session. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Rafael Muente, Chairman of the Board of OCIPTEL, who is unable to attend due to unexpected circumstances. Regarding optimal technologies for bridging digital divides, we can mention that by far, wireless technologies are the most suitable solution to provide the conditions to connect unserved areas, considering lower cost and easier implementation compared to other last-mile technologies, especially in the first stages and when those areas are within the reach of high-capacity terrestrial transport networks. Investing in these terrestrial backbones is extremely relevant to achieve the connectivity goal. In Peru, we have the national fiber optics backbone and regional fiber optics projects that are adding around 40,000 kilometers of fiber optics connectivity to more than 1,500 municipalities and more than 6,600 rural towns wirelessly connected within the country. Although now the current attention is focused on the adoption of 5G technologies, it should be noted that it's necessary to continue with the deployment of 4G LTE that will continue being the main connectivity support for wireless communications and a feasible solution to bridge the digital divide. Since in the short term, 5G networks are still being deployed and their coverage is limited, the final consumer experience on mobile connectivity will still heavily depend on 4G LTE for the next few years. Likewise, it is important to explore new technological alternatives that can also be used to bridge the digital divide, especially in the most isolated areas. Those technologies can be high-altitude platform systems and high-altitude IMT base stations, broadband low and medium orbiting satellite constellations, white space technology, among others. Innovative models should also be promoted in parallel with these technologies. In Peru, we have the Mobile Rural Infrastructure Operator model, which is a neutral, active infrastructure provider which brings access to other mobile operators in order to offer final mobile services to users in rural areas. It is important to point out that the reduction of the digital divide will depend on finding the best combination of deploying technologies and the most efficient models that consider implementation of commercial projects and private-public partnership with the use of universal service funds. Moreover, it is relevant to improve universal service funds policies so that the new projects financed by these funds incorporate new elements to achieve scalability, economic sustainability, and social profitability. In addition to the need to accelerate the bridging of the digital divide, it is important that new projects consider actions related to improve digital literacy. which allows people to be able to take advantage of the potential benefits for their daily life, personal growth, and business entrepreneurship. Coordination among different sectors is urgent to point towards the national policy coordination among different sectors is urgent to point towards the national policy of deployment and usage of broadband connectivity and the appropriation by the people of its benefits. The best example of this coordination with the education sector is to foster connectivity to homes for children to follow distance learning basic education in these times of COVID-19 pandemic. The same is urgent with the public health sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luis Pacheco, and I'm glad you raised the issue of universal service funds. This is one set of funds that has real potential if we can get to apply it very prudently, and also to see that you're challenging, all of us to think at new technologies, especially white space, look at low Earth orbiting technologies, and just look at new ways of making sure that we're able to close the digital divide. So it's important to think broadly and more innovatively as well. So thank you for raising those points.
Thank you.
So last but not least, we go to Ms. Kate Wilson, who is in Seattle and the USA. She's the CEO of Dial. Kate is very happy to have you. And as our final panelist, what are the main drivers of the digital divide today? And where do you think the international focus should be? And what do you think we should do in the way we look at partnerships and collaborations to ensure that we are able to cover everyone, make sure everyone is very inclusive in the way we approach the digital divide innovations?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, distinguished panelists. I always enjoy these panels at Wsis because it really teaches you and tells you the stories of countries on their paths to digital transformation and really exploring what are the challenges that each of you are facing and the innovative strategies that you're coming up to tackle it with. As the person who gets the joy of going last, much of the conversation has really focused on the ability to access connectivity and primarily broadband in much of this conversation, as well as the affordability. And it was striking me as the discussion has progressed back to a story that I started with about 20 years ago. So I started my career actually working in broadband access about 20 years ago. And it strikes me how much the conversations are the same, but how much they also have progressed. And we'll give an example of that. So 20 years ago, I was working with broadband operators in Europe, launching a new entertainment product actually for Microsoft. And it was a broadband only product. And I was laughed out of rooms because people were like, broadband is not going to get that big, that fast. It's going to be too expensive. It's too much of a luxury problem. 20 years later, we're essentially describing this as a human right. And it is. And this last year has definitely illustrated that. What it also illustrates is that each country is on its own unique journey, but we have so much that we can do together. At Dial, the Digital Impact Alliance, we are a think, do, replicate tank. We look at common challenges that are plaguing our entire industry and our world. What happens to governments? What's affecting private sector? What's affecting NGOs? What's affecting countries as they really try and move along this digital transformation journey? We try and test what are new strategies that might address some of those challenges. And then we look at ways that we might be able to replicate it. One of the things that really struck me as this conversation has gone forward is that many of the problems are shared, but we talk about them slightly differently. So I want to highlight what some of those problems are. So we think that there's a big product problem, right? Do we actually have the right connectivity, but also the right products in terms of hardware and software that actually will drive greater digital adoption? We think that there's a policy challenge. Are we actually getting ahead of and actually encouraging things such as many of the speakers have demonstrated today from both the USA, but from Nicaragua, but from St. Vincent? You know, what are the new policy areas that we can do and that we can take and encourage, actually encourage this type of new adoption? we think that there is very critically a pricing and procurement issue. How do we look at how we might be able to pool needs across countries and then be able to also stimulate financing that would actually make access to different types of connectivity, different types of software, different types of hardware actually far more available to countries that may not have that purchasing power on their own. And last but certainly not least, we think we all, everywhere, this is not a developing world, anything problem. This is, we have a capacity problem. Do users actually know what products they want to get? Do they actually understand the privacy and security risks that may come with those? How do we actually empower citizens, as many of the people have talked about, in particular women and girls who may have much less access to this technology, actually do it? But also, how do we create local creators? So how do we not have applications that have been primarily developed in one country and then exported to another? So how do we actually build local creativity around content and then give people and country governments the power to choose and use what technologies are actually most appropriate for them? There's a couple of ways that we think that the international community can come together to actually work together on this in the question of collaboration and partnership. First, we fundamentally believe that we all must work together. We each learn better from one another, and in this journey to digital transformation, we all have something to teach and we all have something to learn. So we call it sort of an ABC approach. First, we want to find and identify and help accelerate these examples of digital transformation that are taking place, because innovation can happen and come from anywhere, and we all need to learn what each other is trying. It's part of the reason I've enjoyed this panel so much today. The second area is that we think we need to build greater momentum and investment and really the policy and evidence base around why financing and public procurement for digital goods actually needs to be accelerated. We also want to build fundamentally the capacity of people to do that. And last, but certainly not least, we want to see an ability to actually connect proven solutions and actually test those and reference implementations. And this is work that we're undertaking with the government of Estonia, ITU, and the government of Germany. We invite each of you to join us on this learning journey, and thank you so much for sharing your stories today.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Kate Wilson, and thank you for sharing all those, great innovations and insights that you're working with various countries on. I'm glad that you mentioned some of the issues, the policy, product challenges, the pricing and procurement, and the need to look at investment and capacity issues. These are all very critical, and I can see that there's great benefit in collaborating across regions in order to learn learn about the innovations that are happening in other places and how we can also apply them. So thank you very much for sharing those wonderful insights. So everyone, you've just listened to all our panelists. I said it was going to be very insightful and exciting. And we've got some questions that are in the chat. So I'm going to go to the first question, which is about the important role of regional organizations for strengthening collaboration at the various levels when it comes to ICT. So I wanted to come to you, Dr. Bilal, if you could speak about some of the regional organizations, and then I'll hand over to the panel as well. If you like to answer this question as well, you could just let me know by raising your hand, but we'll start with Dr. Bilal.
Yes, thank you very much, Eleanor, and thank you for the question. I think that's an important one, because the regional collaboration is bringing countries of similar issues, similar experience, similar development process. We encourage very much regional initiatives, as we can see on the ITU website for the ITU COVID initiatives that were listed. They give a number of examples of initiatives where regional collaboration is critical. Generally speaking, to answer the question about bridging digital divide overall, there are probably, what we heard from the panelists today is that there is a sort of a three-pronged approach. There is the technology, the policy, and the citizen engagement. So in terms of the technology, the connectivity is the basis. Without it, we can't really talk about bridging the digital divide. That's number one priority, as we heard from all the panelists. Then when we embark on providing digital services, we need certain building blocks, and the digital ID is one of them in order to deliver payments, financial subsidies, health services, and so on. All of them rely on having a unique digital ID for the citizen. So those are some examples of technology building blocks. And I think Dr. Mercedes talked quite a bit about the collaboration and the dialogue from a policy perspective. When we talk about digital transformation, it's really, we're bringing two different domain experts together, the ICT technologists, and for example, if we're talking about digital health, the doctors, the practitioners of the health service. If we are addressing financial inclusion, we are bringing two communities together of bankers and central banks making policy, monetary policies, but also the telcos and operators bringing the digital financial services. So the dialogue is critical, and I fully agree with that. So from a policy perspective, probably the key is the dialogue of different domain experts. And the third is the citizen engagement, because as you introduce new digital services, you need to know and listen to what the citizens need, and you need to provide some sort of capacity building or training so that the citizens who are not familiar with the digital means could embark on using those digital services.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, you just clarified some great points in there. I was wondering if any of the panelists wanted to also add some more points to the importance of regional collaborations.
If I might, Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
In the Caribbean, we have been talking about greater collaboration among the different countries in our journey to digitally transform. But we are so internally focused that it hasn't developed much beyond conversation. So I was wondering whether the ITU and its subset, the CTU, which is the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, could be more instrumental in pushing us to actually collaborate, because we do have a region called CARICOM, the Caribbean Common Market, but we are not sufficiently advanced in how we are interconnected and how we operate, and we really should be. And as we move more into the digital world, if we move together as a block, then our community will become more cohesive, and perhaps we can even enjoy greater economies of scale. So I was wondering if there was anything that the ITU and CTU could do to help us on this journey and actually allow us to move forward as a group and to collaborate.
Thank you very much, Minister from Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Bilal Jamouzi, you've heard whether there's can be collaboration between the CTU and the ITU, if there was something in place already.
Absolutely. In the case of, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for the question. I think it's critical to have those groups at the regional level. What we've been doing in the standardization within the ITU is that we encourage to have regional groups within various study groups. For example, the study group on the Internet of Things and Smart Sustainable Cities. We have a Latin American group. In the context of the group that works on financial and economic policies and issues, study group 3 has a Latin American and Caribbean group, because usually the policies and the tariffs and roaming rates and so on are arranged at the regional level. What we found through regional groups is that, one, you can engage in the local language of the region, but you also have very similar needs of the community. And we often partner with the CTO in the case of Caribbean or other regional organizations to drive the international standards requirements and standards that are emerging from our study groups with the needs of the regions and the countries from the regions in mind. And also we use it to lower the barrier of languages and time difference, because it's not always possible, easy to join a study group in Geneva. Now with COVID, it's easier with the digital, but even the time is always an issue. the time zones. So what we try to do through regional groups and regional partnerships is to get that input directly into the global standards process so that all the regions and all the countries of the world are actively participating.
Thank you very much, Bilal. And I believe that Ms. Kate Wilson, you wanted to come in as well?
Yes, and I wanted to build on both the Honorable Minister's point, but also Dr. Bilal's, because I thought it was incredibly important. He started to speak about what happens on top of the layer of infrastructure. And our colleague from Nicaragua gave us a wonderful illustration of how the road infrastructure, the electricity infrastructure, and then ultimately the connectivity infrastructure sort of set the base for which everything else could build upon. And what we like to call it, Dr. Bilal, when you started to talk about digital ID, is basically the layer cake approach, right? So you start on top of that very core foundation with a layer for digital ID, a layer for payments, a layer for data security, and then be able to then unleash innovation on top of it that all is built in a standards-based approach. And to the Honorable Minister's question, I think our ability to actually come together and align on what's actually necessary, the minimum necessary. And I want to be very clear about that, not the maximum or everything that is completely tied to what any individual one country needs, but the minimum necessary will help then drive this type of product innovation. I mean, fundamentally, this device was not built for one country or one sector. Yet sometimes in development, we treat things as this is a health innovation or an education innovation. It's critical that we actually come together and look at this as this is an innovation that is needed to drive SDG services that can be delivered through these types of product technologies. And then the private sector has something upon which it can build. But those needs are really driven by your citizens and your government's needs, not necessarily by what someone in, let's say, Seattle, Washington dreamed up.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's a very, very good point that you raised about making sure that the needs are, you make the needs specific to your country and also ensure that you are also part of the co-creating process. So just looking at the next question, which was about ICT response during COVID, I would be very keen to find out from the various panelists and ministers here, what's the one ICT response you've had to undertake to respond to COVID in your various countries? Just let me know if we can, because I can't see everyone on my screen, but if you really want to take this question, I'll be very happy if you could just unmute and
so in Trinidad and Tobago, there are two key things that we needed to do. We needed to provide to increase the access of our service providers to broadband so that they could strengthen the signals that were available to people and broaden the net. And so we provided free broadband. Actually, we're still providing free broadband to them and determining when we should do the switchover and require them to pay for that additional access. And we also had to provide devices, especially to our students, so that they could come into the distance learning program. So those were two of the key initiatives that we did as a result of the pandemic.
Thank you very much. And so I've just been alerted that we are running out of time. So I'd just like to do a quick wrap up of all the discussions. First of all, I want to thank the panelists here, honorable ministers and regulators and chairpersons and CEOs. You've just given us some of the most insightful discussions that we can ever have on a panel on how to close the digital divide. There's so many things that we have raised here, but I'll just do a very brief summary of the key points that have come through. The key thing is that we need to look at the issue of policy. There have been some great examples here about broadband initiatives that have been undertaken by various countries, and it will be great to see how these shape up as well. So the issue of policy is very, very important. Regulations need to be forward-looking as well, very inclusive, very agile, and we need to ensure that we have a very collaborative sense of how we undertake regulations in order to address the issues of digital skills, gaps, and demand and supply of infrastructure. We also need to look at the issue of technology as well. Look at innovative ways of bringing on new technology, look at the issues of investment, look at the issues of new technologies that are emerging, last mile connectivity as well, and ensure that those are captured in the way we try to address the digital gap. Also, the issue of devices is very critical. Affordability of devices is very important as well, and the funding of those devices. Then there was also the discussion about the importance of infrastructure and looking at a very collaborative and multi-layered approach. The examples I gave between looking at roads, electricity, and connectivity as one that we can look at, and also working across the whole of government. So this is the issue of closing the digital divide. It's not just limited to one ministry. It's one that we can work across various ministries and also collaborate with the private sector, with civil society, and with multilateral banks and public sector to ensure that we have a very clear focus on how to close the digital divide. And also there were very important discussions about addressing the skills gaps as well, and ensuring that you have a very targeted approach, making sure that communities that are most likely to be marginalized are captured, and you have a very targeted approach towards gender and closing the homework gap as well. So there are a lot of discussions, a lot to unpack here, a lot that we can take away, and some really great examples. And I want to thank everyone for participating in this session. For the closing remarks, I think that I will bring in Dr. Malcolm Johnson again. And I think that I just want to say a very big thank you for these very insightful discussions as well. So thank you to the entire panel.
Yep. Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you for conducting this session so efficiently and keeping everybody on track. So let me just thank all the panelists. I mean, it was tremendously encouraging to hear the progress that's been made in the countries we heard from in closing this digital divide, which is so critical. I think that the fact that ICTs have become so important during this pandemic is going to mean that there will be extra effort made now in closing this digital divide. So I believe some good will come out of this. And we've seen the efforts that are being made, and the fact that we have good efforts being made both from the public sector and the private sector. And collaboration is the key word, I believe. Something that we always stress anyway in ITU. You know, we can't work to close this divide alone. Everybody has to work together, bring our own specific competencies to the table, and work together, avoid duplication of effort, and pool our resources. That's really the key. And this is why, you know, as Bill mentioned, we're very keen to work with all organizations, and especially the regional organizations. The CTU, we work very closely with. We have almost the same membership. And it's the same with the other regional groups, the CTEL, etc. So collaboration is key. And I believe that bringing people together like this is going to help with that collaboration. I hope you'll continue to keep in touch with each other and work towards a better future for everyone everywhere. So thank you all very much, especially the panelists from the Americas getting up so early, especially on the West Coast of the States. So thank you all very much. And thank you again, Eleanor.